Aloha! Welcome to the sharpest college football podcast, Island Time. This is where we take care of the games that we were not able to fit into our ordinary preview that dropped on Monday morning. You will notice that not with us is Robert Martin, typical co-host. He is in a secure location in advance of tomorrow's election. In his stead, we have our Big Ten correspondent and expert, even more so of an expert than noted Big Ten expert Stu Mandel, Isaiah Walker. Isaiah, thank you for filling in for Robert. We appreciate it.
Should have known you were going to hit the Stu Mandel reference immediately.
Exactly. And as always, Steponaduck is in his regular spot. Duck, hope you're doing well. How did you do last weekend?
Pretty good. I had a good weekend. The plays were good. I had some FCS plays. It was a good weekend. Hit a money line parlay with Houston and Hawaii. Really a good
Wow.
weekend for me, yes.
What did that pay? Like 5-1 or so?
No, it was like 7 or 8 to 1, yeah.
Wow. Really well done. Was that a Zion Chris faith play, or what was the thinking there on Houston?
That was a Houston live play when they were down by about six, and then put it in before the Hawaii game started. And I liked the way Houston was playing. I liked the way their defense was playing. And of course, they got the
Yeah.
ball back. They scored, took the lead, and then scored again to extend the lead. So that was really nice to see them rise above it in the second half.
Well done on that. I can tell you I did not hit anything at 5-1. So with that, let's get to the games. We've got, I think, 6 that we're going to cover here. We will go first to the ones where Robert's model and mine disagreed, not violently, but enough to keep it from being a play here. And when I ran the numbers here, I was thankful that his model talked me off of this. Memphis giving 10.5, hosting Rice. I've been really steadily against Memphis for most of the season. It's one of my recurring themes here. Rice seems a bridge too far to me, though. That's a big leap of faith. Roberts and I model, let me get my laser pointer here if I might. We both got Rice about 20 points. Big difference is he's got Memphis with basically 10 more points than my model has. Really the big difference, if you look, this is the one thing that sticks out here in terms of what Robert's model is putting is he's got Seth Hennigan with a 123 apex, and that's been one of those things I've been harping on is he's not nearly as good. He wasn't as good last year as people are making it out to be, and this year he's not nowhere close to as good as last year. Last year's apex was 110. He was not exceptional. He was just good. Now he's actually below average with the apex at 87. Robert's model has him with a 123 apex in this game, even though Rice, much to my surprise, has a functional pass defense here, above average, 86 apex. That's where I see the difference between my model and Robert's. Memphis, not really a stout offense here at a 0.2. That's basically FBS average. I like my model here, but not enough to really override the Knicks from Roberts' model and undo the whole notion of the dual play. Duck, how do you see this one? Do you see Memphis covering the 10.5?
Yeah, I think that you have a situation in this one where you can buy low and sell high on both teams. Rice really rallied the troops after firing their head coach, and teams often do that in their first game with the interim, and then they come back to earth. And it was really surprising to see Rice have so much defensive success against Navy. There was also a 5.5 hour rain delay, and that game finished in the middle of the night. But I was really shocked to see how Rice performed in the trenches against Navy and really limited everything Navy wanted to do. It was really quite shocking to see. Road Rice this year has been much different performance wise than home Rice, losing at UConn, at Tulane, at Army, and at Houston. And the other side of the coin is that Memphis has really struggled the last couple of weeks. Their offense has seemingly been in slow motion. They've been just stuck in the mud. And then the defense has not performed well after having played well much of the season in wins against North Texas and Charlotte, and then a loss last week at UTSA. I was looking at this game earlier, and Memphis does have some significant advantages that are really just too much to overcome for Rice, in my opinion. So Rice has no offensive explosiveness. Rice is 112th in offensive success rate nationally. They're 84th in havoc allowed. Havoc is typically defined as sacks, negative plays, turnovers, things of that nature. And they are just there should have very little explosiveness in this game. So are they going to be able to put together 4 or 5 drives? And then when they do get in the red zone, they really struggle finishing drives in the end zone. They've settled for field goals or fourth down stops way too frequently. I think this might be a situation where Memphis kind of gets it right on defense. My play on this game would be to either lay it with Memphis, or I like the Rice team total under 23.5 or so. When you look at how Rice has performed all season, they haven't scored 23.5 on the road all year, and their high has been 14 at Army. So I don't really see Rice having a lot of success offensively. If they do hang in there, it's going to have to be on the defensive side, which they could certainly limit what Memphis is wanting to do, but Rice team total under 23 is where I would go with this one.
Let me, before I throw it to Isaiah, I want you to go one by one of those road losses and let me just give like a one sentence. This is pretty interesting here.
Yeah, so Rice at Houston, which is a inner city game, but it was at
Yeah,
Houston.
they just had a very nice win. We were nice win, underrated team probably earlier in the season, but I can forgive that. Okay, let's go
At,
next.
at Army,
I have them as a top 5 team, as does Robert. Keep going. This is interesting.
at Tulane,
At Tulane, who has won 6 in a row, as I said, with a margin of 230 to 116 in those 6 games. Keep
and
going.
at
Yep.
UConn. At UConn.
Not great, but they're bowl eligible ahead of my Trojans at least. Not they've had probably the easiest schedule. So I might give them a little bit of a break on that. I'd say Memphis might be one of the worst of that group of teams, maybe. So possible. I like your angle of just the dysfunction of the offense there. So with that, Isaiah, do you see specific to this play? Do you see Memphis getting closer to my 24 or Robert's 34 here?
I mean, I think if you had to make a play on the spread, I would lean towards Memphis on this because I do like the idea of fading a team who you don't really overall think is that good coming off of a big win, right? Like most people didn't see them beating Navy. So is that Navy game priced into this line a little bit more than you'd like? But I'm a little hesitant for the reasons you mentioned on Memphis, where this is an okay, not great Memphis team with some cracks in it. And I just don't know if you can trust this Rice offense. Like they're coming off that big emotional win. Yeah, you've got the new coach, you've got the emotional rally. How long does that really last? I had thought about the overall under on this game, but then again, is this a situation where Rice gets their 10 to 14 points and then Memphis just has maybe a get right game against this struggling team? I do Ducks play on the team total under because I, even in these quote unquote better performances for Rice, and again, most of them are at home, they're getting 20 points mostly. Every once in a while, they pull like a 24 or something. But I I don't think I would trust that on the road. So I'm James Green to stay away from me, but I'm leaning towards a lower scoring kind of thing where Memphis kind of pulls away at the end. I don't know if I want to, especially the 10.5. That hook, I don't really like that hook.
Yeah, you know what? I want to go back a little bit deeper in that the point that I just made, specific to their road games, like the defenses that they played. I had Tulane actually jump into one of my top 10 defensive metrics last week, and they have a great defensive coach in Summerall. Army's been a top 20 defense basically since my first set of stats, and Houston actually, before the stats came out, I just had as a sneaky good defense too. Having said that, it's really scary to bet Rice here, just for the reasons of ineptitude. What is interesting though to me too is the strongest unit by my metrics in this game is actually the Rice defense, interestingly enough. Robert did pass along one note on this. He was surprised, as we basically was every human on the planet that watched the game outside of Houston. He was surprised that Rice actually beat Navy, and he's tempted to take Rice here. So I guess if we go with the spirit of Robert here, we're vaguely split, even though Robert's going against his own model there. So maybe it's Robert and I, 2, you 2, 2, and then Robert's model breaks the tie against me. So I like that play on the Rice under, as much as I've been crushing the Memphis defense this season.
Current line is Memphis -9 too. I don't know if that changes anything for anybody.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, and thank you. Like these were basically kind of post openers. These are not the most current lines. Thank you for that. That's interesting.
One other thing too, I hate to play arithmetic with the implied total and the implied scores, but if you are not a believer in the Rice offense on the road here, but the total is still set at 53, where are those points coming from?
Yeah, it comes right to 22 actually. 53. Yeah, 53 minus 9, 44, 22. 31-22 is what they're modeling out, basically.
Yeah, 32. Yeah, that's what about it is. Yeah, 31-22.
All right. This next one is, boy, whoops. This feels to me, I don't know. We're actually in the second weekend of November, and this feels to me like one of those week one price discovery games where you have two new head coaches and rosters totally turned over. I know what Middle Tennessee State is, and it frightens me. They basically do one thing well, and it's throw the ball, and they do it very well. They have an explosive passing game. Omarion Duck, you might know his last name better. Omarion Kelly? Is that his
Mm-hmm.
name? Yeah. Been a top 10 receiver in my player Ryan rankings almost all year. But boy, this defense cannot stop a cold. They're just brutally bad. And if you've figured out Liberty, please let me know because I have no idea what this team is except disappointing. But the degree to which they're disappointing is just a matter of interpretation. Now, having said that, Liberty is, I don't know how up to date this is. I'm curious if it's moved which way, Liberty in this one. Do you have that, Doc?
Yeah, Liberty's 10 and a half. The total is 54.
Okay. So not too much movement. Robert's got Liberty with actually margin for this to be a play. He's got a touchdown margin here. I actually at 10 and a half, I would have it. This is a margin going the other way, my model. So this is where we've got dual model conflict, I guess we would call it. Really, the difference here is Middle Tennessee State. I've got them scoring 32. Robert's model has them scoring 21. Boy, this defense is just not good for Liberty. They were actually functional in defense for most of last year. This defensive apex 95, I haven't seen, not like I watch any Middle Tennessee games, Middle Tennessee State games, but I know of, have seen box scores of games where Middle Tennessee State has picked apart pass defenses better than Liberty's. It's really weird, and it's going to be short lived because I'm old and I forgot his name. Derek, come on, former Stanford
Mason.
DC.
Mason.
Mason, thank you so much. The old man thanks you for his help. Derek Mason is a defensive guy, so not really encouraging when all the progress is on the offensive side of the ball. But it's been consistent for almost all the year, and again against better pass defenses here. I don't see anything really crazy in what Robert's model is spitting out. I can definitely see Caden Salter getting a 115 apex, maybe a little more. These rushing numbers make sense as Middle Tennessee is just horrible on defense. The 121 apex seems about right for Vadiato and the inability to rush the ball. I guess I just put it together. My model puts it together and gets a touchdown, a two-pointer, and a field goal more than Middle Tennessee State, which I'm not going to go against Robert's model, but seems like there's a lot of last year in the Liberty numbers still. So I believe my model here, but I'm not playing it. But if you have to choose between my number and Robert's number here for Middle Tennessee State, I guess let's start with this for you, Isaiah. Whose number do you think is closer to the likely outcome?
I'm definitely not playing a side on this, but I think I'm leaning with your model. I'll be honest, like you've mentioned, Middle Tennessee State with the pass game has found a way to score on respectable pass defenses. But if I were to play Middle Tennessee here, I actually feel like it's more of a fade on Liberty than it is. Than it is a play on Middle Tennessee State. Basically, I've been personally beating the drum this season that this Liberty team is fraudulent. I did not think they deserved the hype they got in the preseason where it felt like everybody was on them. And it's played out. Whereas, okay, first couple of weeks is whatever. I had that scare against New Mexico State, which is not a team you want to have a scare against this year. And then, but I don't want to say I was like vindicated when they lost to Kennesaw State, but that was like, what are you doing? And then instead, where they said, okay, that's a fluke. We're going to prove that we're legitimate by turning around and winning at home with a close line game against Jacksonville State, and they lose by 10. Yeah. And that game was sloppy. They were making all kinds of mistakes. And then at the end of the game where they had to make a play, the offense couldn't get it done. So I'm looking at a team that we know has a really good offense. And yeah, they have a defense that can't stop anything at all. But I guess I would lean towards them. My favorite play here, and it looks like your models have picked up on this, is actually the over on this. Mm-hmm. because you have a situation here where I don't trust Liberty to play a clean game here. They're on the road too. Um, I don't trust them to play a clean game. I think you'll have some turnovers. I think Middle Tennessee State has the offense to take advantage of those mistakes. Penalties too been a problem for Liberty in the past couple of games. Can take advantage of that. And then you have the other side, whereas Liberty will score points in this game. They're going to be able to put points up on Middle Tennessee State. I like the over on this.
Yeah, the more we talk about it, it's like Liberty is like the CUSA version of USC, but able to, I don't know, able to sneak out some of those really questionable wins that USC is not able to win. So just to make a little bit about me and my team. Duck, just to start off, are you seeing Middle Tennessee scoring closer to my model's 32 or Robert's 21?
It's really tough here to answer that question because a couple things I struggle with. Middle Tennessee, their offensive line play is just so atrocious. And Viatato has been running for his life all year. The offense as a team is averaging 2.8 yards per carry and we'll call it 90 rushing yards per game. They've surrendered 24 sacks. The overall metrics are just really bad. They're terrible in finishing drives. They're 106th nationally in offensive success rate. They allow a ton of havoc. They can't run the ball. Even their passing down success rate is just marginal, and so they're going to have to throw the ball on Liberty in order to score points, and they're really going to have to find ways to convert on third down, something they have been really bad at this season. It's hard for me to back a team to score when they're running for 2.8 yards per carry and they're converting third down at let's call it 35%. It's just a recipe for a lot of either fourth and short, you're going to have to go for it, or you're going to be punting a lot and playing the field position game. Now, Liberty's been one of the most disappointing teams in the country for bettors. They're just 1-6 ATS this season. And their one cover was a game that was also severely rain delayed in the middle of the night. They hosted East Carolina. They were
Oh,
down
yeah.
17-0 and miraculous and a half. Shouldn't have covered. Um, you alluded to it earlier. Something with this Liberty team is clearly wrong. Now, the last couple of games, they've had their top two receivers out with injury to go along with just being an underperforming football team. Certainly not the offensive dynamic playmaking ability that we saw last year. And maybe it's that teams in the conference are seeing it twice and starting to figure out what they're hoping to do.
Good point. Yeah.
And so my numbers, honestly, and if you go back to your priors, Liberty is should be far and away the better team. But how do you back a team that's 1-6 ATS and who has just seemingly underperformed every week, losing last week at home against Jacksonville State in a game that they absolutely had to have? The Kennesaw loss was bad. Could barely hang on against FIU. It's just been brutal all season, so it's really hard to lay points on the road. With that said, the one unit you cannot trust is the atrocious Middle Tennessee State defense, which is
Yep.
just when you look at EPA per play allowed, pass defensive success rate, rush success rate. I mean, Middle Tennessee this is a spot where they could give up 45 plus. So I would lean taking Liberty's team total over. It's all really just depends on how Liberty plays defensively, right? Because they're going to stop the run. So are they going to be able to hold up in pass coverage? Can they get to the quarterback? That'll really determine if Middle Tennessee is in the 30s or in the low 20s.
Yeah, it's interesting. Two things in response to what you said. First of all, you basically echoed what Robert's comments were on this one. He said, "I don't trust I don't trust Liberty, but I trust Middle Tennessee less." And if I go through everything you said, I agree. And it almost sounds like you're making a case for this is the line that stinks. Because, which is one reason when I saw my model, even though I disagree with Robert's model, I'm glad that it talked us out of it kicked out of the dual model play scenario and into the dual model conflict and onto this podcast. But yeah, you make a good point too about just Middle Tennessee is a one trick pony, and that one trick is basically Vadiato and Kelly. And aside from that, there's no plan B. There's no second act. It's just the first act again and again. But it works from time to time. Crazy enough. I don't know. This is a scary game to bet. And now because it's Maction month, this is going to be buried on Saturday, unfortunately.
Yeah, or fortunately, so you don't have to bet it or watch it, to be honest with you. The other interesting thing is 3 weeks ago, this line would have been 23.5. So if you
Yeah.
are looking at perception, there is some significant value in laying it with Liberty. Not saying that's the right play or that they're on the right side, but based on perception, again, 3 weeks ago, this would have been minus 23.5.
3 weeks ago, what would their line have been against Kennesaw State? I'm just curious.
Similar to what it was, 27.5.
Yeah. I'm never going to get over that one. That was my dream. That was going to be my college football preseason prediction. What do they call it? Opus. And
Yeah,
now it's just,
I hope that doesn't ruin a great Kennesaw State under 2.5 team regular season wins for us, though.
I expressed my fear about that on the podcast, but just if it gone 0-12, I would have been just impossible to be around. I would have bought a Kennesaw State T-shirt first of all, and just been anybody to ask me about. I would just bore them for 10 minutes about the story and about UT Martin and this and that and everything. And by the end, I'd have no friends at all, except for you two and Robert. But anyways, okay, we move on to two teams that need a get well spot here, and I'm not sure how I land on this because there's a lot that I need to sort out. I guess just first of all, let's just get the line update from Duck since he's been assigned to line monitoring duty. And while he's looking up that, do either of you, this Colin Schlee situation, didn't know Drones was hurt, didn't know Drones
I
was out
didn't.
last week. That might
I didn't
explain
know
how they
either.
lost. If he had come in, that might explain how they lost a winnable game against Syracuse.
Looks like he was the only one who played too. So Jones didn't play at all.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
was a lot. Sorry, Doug, go ahead.
their running back too, Luton, was also out and didn't play.
There was a lot of weird quarterback stuff that happened last week too. I guess this among them, just
Yeah,
guys not playing suddenly and just horrible or weird performances. Sorry, Doug,
and
go
you don't
ahead.
hear anything, and you don't hear anything about it until 5 minutes before kickoff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Is
the
this one still
line
6.5? Sorry, go ahead.
Clemson minus 6.5, over under 52.5.
Okay, so that's come down, which makes sense. Two formerly good defensive teams. I This doesn't surprise me. My model's been bearish on Clemson for a while, and it's again to make it all about me and my team. It has Virginia Tech as a inverse version of USC, where they're stronger on the defensive side of the ball, but they just find stupid ways to lose games, which they've done in tremendous fashion, much like my Trojans. So it doesn't surprise me that my model had Virginia Tech here by over a field goal. Roberts actually got Clemson big here. This is another one where if I'm getting 6.5 and my model has the wrong team favored and basically he's got it, this is where you've got the dual model conflict as we call it. Um, what I see in his model that doesn't really line up with mine. He's got Clemson with 47 rushes for 227 yards. If I look at this, 47, yeah, that comes to about, if I average these, that's about 90. So, yeah, close enough. Maybe that's a little aggressive. The Colin Schlee thing, I don't know what his numbers are. Very limited data point. He was talented as a MAC quarterback way back when, um,
He was
before UCLA. Sorry, go
he
ahead.
was 16 of 24 for 206 yards and a touchdown
All right.
against.
That's good, although Syracuse doesn't really have a good defense, though, right? They're more of an offensively strong team. Not a bad. I
After
mean, that's
last
eight
week,
yards.
Clemson doesn't have a defense either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got Virginia Tech here, 37 rushes for 166 yards. I guess I don't see that much difference here in the running games or the run defenses. Maybe that's where I'll start. So I'm having a hard time with Clemson being incrementally so much stronger in the run game. Klubnik's apex is reasonable in this spot. It's a little aggressive, but not too terribly so. If I look at everything here, except for the quarterback position, I see it pretty much even, and I only give Klubnik the nod there because he's been solid and he's a proven entity this year. And Schlee is unknown, although that's a nice game right there. 8 yards. Did he have any interceptions last week?
Nope.
8 yards an attempt and no interceptions is super solid. I think that was a road game too. It looked like the highlights looked like they were in the dome.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. So I look at these. My eyes tell me the same thing. Now the strongest units here are the Clemson offense and then the Virginia Tech defense. So maybe that comes to about a draw. It's at Virginia Tech. I want to split the baby in half in here and just say it's closer than Virginia Tech by 5. I'd have it like a field goal game either way. I'd probably prefer my model have it like a 1 point or a tie game, but I don't see Clemson The 29 I see, the 12 I do not see. I just don't believe in their defense that much, and I guess that goes back to this kind of struggling relatively on the rushing game. So I've just thrown out a bunch of different data points, but I think Virginia Tech is, not that I'm going to play it here, but if I was, Virginia Tech plus the 6.5, might wait for it to get to 7, and if I can't get that, then just take the 6. I think that's my play. What do you make of this one, Duck?
So, a couple things. I really want to see the injury report, and I want to know if Tootin, the running back, and also Drones, the quarterback, are going to be playing for Virginia Tech. The other thing that is noteworthy is Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern is a much different Virginia Tech home environment than Thursday night at 8 p.m. with the Enter Sandman and all the pomp and circumstance. So, the home field advantage for Virginia Tech, they have a good home field advantage, but it's not as magnified as a Thursday night game. We saw that a couple weeks ago when they hosted BC. It's just a raucous environment in the isolated situation. Now let's go back to Clemson, right? They outgained Louisville by over 100 yards, put up 450 yards, and they out first downed Louisville 31-19. So what happened, right? They only scored 21 points and only 7 through the first 3 quarters. You have a 10-play drive that ended in a punt. You have an 11-play drive that ended in a punt. You have a missed field goal off a 10-play drive. End of half, you have a stopped on downs, another missed field goal, and then they punch in a couple touchdowns. So it's really surprising. A team that was extremely efficient offensively all season really did well with finishing drives, really did well with explosive plays. Goodness, they just did not have it against Louisville at home off a bye. You would have thought that was a spot for them to just completely show out, and they did not do it. And
Yeah.
so the conference hopes are not dashed, but like it's must win the rest of the way here. And so again, if they believe they can get to the conference championship game, they're going to need some help. They don't control their own destiny, but it's really time now to really ratchet it up. Again, with Virginia Tech, I like the run defense. I think that we've seen it against other teams where their defensive line can just completely wreak havoc, or their defensive line can disappear and have no impact on the game whatsoever. So hard to know what's going to happen there. I've got to know who's quarterbacking, and I've got to know if the running back is in, and those two things will help me with a play. It really seems like the books are extremely comfortable with the Clemson money pouring in, right? I'd almost rather that line be something else, right? Because it'd be so easy to just go to the window and place your bet on Clemson minus 6.5. Oh, they're going to win by a touchdown. And it just almost seems too easy. It's one of those weird conundrums where I would almost like Clemson more if they were laying 7.5.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would also like Clemson more if I could get my counterparty to lay 110 also, but that's a different matter. Going through this streak that Clemson's had, and I've never really done this analysis, not that looking at my phone is a deep analysis, but here's where they got well after they got blown out by Georgia. This is not exactly a murderer's row. App State, who's been really disappointing this year, NC State, who was really mystifyingly bad until they played Stanford, who was the next team that Clemson played in this streak. Then Florida State, congratulations on that. That's basically table stakes right there. Then Wake Forest, who's not been good, and then Virginia, who they're a little better than last year, question mark, but hardly something that you're going to measure yourself against. So I think Louisville is really their tough test since the open. Not that Louisville's as good as Georgia, so maybe they just had a little bit of a talent shock too. So yeah, I guess that makes me just really wonder exactly what this Clemson is. Where are they? I've got a lot of data points here that say they're somewhere between the good teams and the bad teams, which makes this kind of closer to a field goal game than a 6.5 point game. What do you think, Isaiah?
Yeah. Can I Clemson rant here? Is Clemson ranting allowed here?
Of course.
Okay, let's Clemson rant. So, like, obviously, they come into the season ranked, and I was a bit skeptical on it. Because I don't remember exactly what they were quite high, if I remember correctly. And I was pretty skeptical on it. And then they just get their doors blown off by Georgia. And I think at the time, a lot of people were like, oh, it's Georgia. Georgia does that to people. And then they play this, as you mentioned, very manageable stretch of 6 games, and magically everybody's back on the train. The thing with Clemson that I wonder is it feels every year like this is the team that the media and that everybody wants. They want any excuse to say Clemson's back to what they were. And I remember thinking after that Georgia game where they got blown out and everybody was like, oh, Georgia does that to everybody. And I was like, you remember when Clemson blew somebody out and people go, Clemson does that to everybody? It just feels like something is really off with the vibes around here. So I don't like seeing them lose the game the way they did, stalling on the drives, whatever. They probably could have put up quite a few more points if they hadn't had all those mistakes and stuff. But the way that game got away from them as quickly as it did
At home.
is yeah, at home. And I was with you. I think last week you had advocated was Clemson to do a monoplay last week. I think it was.
It was
right?
over. The over.
Over. Okay.
Yeah.
But either way, I just expected so much more out of them. And I have my thoughts on Dabo. This whole I'm not going to touch the transfer portal. I'm not going to do anything different from how I've been doing it for the past whatever. It's not working. I'm sorry, man. It's not working. So the other thing I think about Clemson is I look at them versus Virginia Tech, and I see like parallels in these two teams a little bit in that, Clemson, I think, got hyped up again based on beating a bunch of teams that like whatever, right? Are we hyping you up for beating Florida State? I hope not. And then I look at Virginia Tech, where like they always do, have let me down this year, betting their win total yet again. And I made a joke about it preseason. So again, shout out to my friend who told me, really, we're doing this again. And they let me down. But in their losses, they're not getting blown out, right? They lost by 7 in overtime to Vanderbilt, which turns out that's not a bad loss at all. They lost by 3 to Rutgers. That's not looking so great right now. They arguably should have beat Miami, and then they lost by 7 in overtime to Syracuse. They're beating themselves, but when they beat themselves, they don't just crap the bed, right? All of that said, I lean towards Virginia Tech on this. They're probably going to hurt me again. So should I advocate a Virginia Tech bet when all they do is ever let me down? I don't know. But the vibe on this Clemson team is so weird that I don't like this situation where they have to go in, and even though it's not a night game at Lane Stadium, it's not an easy place to play. It's not the juggernaut environment that it would be at night, but it's not an easy place to play. At least through that one game, Virginia Tech appears to have something there in case their regular quarterback and running back can't go. Mm-hmm. Syracuse is not a juggernaut team. It's a game they should have won, but it's not like the Clemson defense is Georgia. Does Clemson win this game? Maybe. But I don't like the odds that they're going to just come on the road and blow out a good, not great Virginia Tech team. So I think I would take the 6.5. I would love if I could get the 7.
Yeah.
But I agree with you on the pricing too. Like this feels like they really want you on Clemson.
Yeah. In all fairness,
I'll tell anyone who will listen to, as part of the repertoire of your handicapping, there's so many elements that go into it. And so you've got the X's and O's and the scheme and the coaching and the scheduling spots and all of the different things that go on the field. But a percentage of the handicapping should be a little bit of market analysis and why the lines would open in a particular fashion, right? It would be so easy to have opened this at 7.5. Let the Virginia Tech money come in, and then maybe you get some buyback on Clemson. But right away, 6.5 shows you that they are very comfortable with the money pouring in on the Tigers.
Does that mean it won't go to 7?
Whether it goes to 7 or not, Vegas is completely comfortable with all the 6.5 money coming in on Clemson, and then maybe they move the line to 7 and get a little buyback on Virginia Tech rather than the other way around.
Okay. I'm already down. It doesn't matter to me. Those market movements, all I know is usually my best plays, by the time that my unlicensed book drops them, the totals have moved 2 points against me. Such is my life. All right. This is like the weird cousin to Liberty at Middle Tennessee. Now, this was one I was just praying as soon as I ran my numbers. I'm like, Robert, please just bail me out of this. And his model did. I'm not going to get too deep into this because I had a pretty good case about New Mexico State. New Mexico State, I don't know if they're as bad as Kent State, but they're really trying hard in that derby. just if you just look at what FIU was before that game and then where FIU came out in terms of just the game that Keon Jenkins had, and all of a sudden now they're a top 5 run defense. I guess like when we look back at the Tony Sanchez contribution to the game of college football, this might be it, just like making everybody else look better. I don't know. I don't want to get too much into that higher, but I'll just make this quick. I don't see New Mexico State getting anywhere close to 23. And Western Kentucky's turned around. They had some kind of weird issues happening with their offense. I don't know if it was last year. Yeah, I think it was last year. But Velkamp's, he's turned things around. I actually, even though these are some absurd numbers, they're also super believable. I can see Velkamp getting a 209 apex. I can see New Mexico State with a -6. I can see Western Kentucky running for as much as ever they want. And if there's one thing that looks a little optimistic, it's this number right here, New Mexico State. If they get 120 yards, that might be job well done, guys. So I'm here to go against my model explicitly here. There's no way, Isaiah, that you're going to make the case for the Aggies, are you?
Nope. You might as well ask me to make a case for Kent State.
There you go.
This is depressing because we are not far removed from betting on New Mexico State being one of my favorite plays every week.
It was about a year ago when they were getting 21 up to 24 to 27, whatever it was, at Auburn.
I was on the money line for that game, and they won outright. It was just like, boy, this was such a fun program and a fun team to watch. And I buy Robert's model 6. Maybe is 6 generous? How do you have what do you do with a 10 apex?
Yeah, it turns into a -6 game.
What do you have to do to get a 10 apex?
Well, the good news is Tony Sanchez's background is on offense too, so he's really turned around the offense there.
Wow, you're talking about team with a coach who's a specialist in something who is really bad at that particular thing. What? Where have
we seen that? Not sure.
No. I would not put any money on New Mexico State. You couldn't pay me to do it.
And to that point,
there's some absurdly low team total under here on New Mexico State. Is it like 3.5 or something?
Like the old Sam Houston. If anything, I think Western Kentucky given them 20.5. I wouldn't be surprised if this moved up to 22, 23 by now, because this seems like they could cover that by halftime.
That's what I.
Yeah, my model's just flat out wrong on this. Duck, do you have a more recent number, or do you have any reason to make a case about why you wouldn't want to give the points with Western Kentucky here?
Well, current line is 18.
What?
Yep. So Western Kentucky -18. Now, I will say New Mexico State against FBS competition is 3-0 against the number at home, so they have played better at home. It is a super long roadie for Western Kentucky. And then they've got a quasi CUSA rivalry with Louisiana Tech on deck. I would say that if I'm trying to make a case here, we're really deep in the dumpster, but if I'm trying to make a case for New Mexico State, I'm going to play New Mexico State in the first half. In the last couple of losses, they have competed well in the first half before fading, and you'll probably see a first half line of somewhere around +11.5, +12.5, and I think if you're going to play the Aggies in this spot, which, again, I'm not advocating doing, the one thing that I would hope to see them do is be able to run the football. Western Kentucky does not have a real strong run defense, and they have given up some rush explosiveness this season, so maybe they come out a little bit flat. Maybe New Mexico State can throw a punch here. I will say this about Western Kentucky. The way their game ended last week against Kennesaw State was very gross, very bad. They were laying 24. They scored a touchdown to go up 31-7. They get a 3 and out. They get the ball all the way down into the red zone. I think they were stopped on downs, and then they give up a 7-minute drive, and Kennesaw State punches one in to lose by 17. So there is some potential for that sort of disgusting behavior from Western Kentucky as well. My recommendation would be there are so many better games to play, but if I was really pressed to find a spot where I could like New Mexico State, I could potentially get behind them in the first half, assuming they can fire off the ball and maybe run it for 4.5 yards a carry in the first half.
I don't know. I'm first of all, when I'm just curious, Isaiah, if you did the same as me when he said the line's down to 18, did you immediately start to Google Caden Velkamp injury?
No,
Okay.
well, I was actually that it just makes me suspicious. Why is the line moving to give you a better line on Western Kentucky? That does make me a little suspicious because I just see so little reason to bet the full game line on New Mexico State here. I'm just like even looking through this schedule, and it's just on them for getting the overtime win against Louisiana Tech. I would love to know how New Mexico let them score 40.
And New Mexico's defense is just it's just a piece of art. I'll just say that it's
No,
awesome.
that's got to be really that's just bad.
It's
Um,
not art.
the
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I said
the first
sharp actually. Sorry, I must have cut out there.
the first half spread makes sense. I definitely get that angle, but I can't put money on this team. So I guess my personal feeling is I'm either taking Western Kentucky for the full game, and maybe they do cover two touchdowns in the first half and fall apart. Um, I just I can't make a case for this New Mexico State team. And if you're
Yeah,
giving me 18, like I know that screams suspicious with that line movement, but that's just I'm not touching that. What are because also Western Kentucky is are they tied for first in CUSA right now? Or they
yeah, I
or
think they're
no?
undefeated. Yeah, because Sam Houston has one loss, and Western Kentucky is tied with Jacksonville
Jacksonville.
State. Yeah, I mean they're a functional team, and New Mexico State is not. The real shame of this, just to wrap this one up, is that somehow the schedule makers lacked the sixth sense of humor and did not have New Mexico State play Kennesaw State. That would have been just one for the ages. Just epic. Are on to games where we don't have the models conflicting. This is the game of the week. I we actually this is a dual model play, and I missed when I made the slides yesterday because I was in a hurry. Not only is this a dual model play on Ole Miss, we actually have this as a wrong team favored significantly. That's not often. You've got the Georgia Brandon here. That's really has a lot of inertia, I think, gravitational pull or whatever you want to say. But we basically have the same game, basically 34-24 between our two models. This is going to be a great game to watch. To me, this comes down to two things. I don't. Carson Beck has basically stunk for most of this year and been really bad for stretches. He has 11 interceptions on the year. This 92 apex, I don't see. Ole Miss is not the best pass defense around, but I don't see how this guy that struggled in spot after spot is now going to go on a road. Interesting. Not that I'm an SEC expert. Ole Miss seems like one of those places when they're actually good and they can get all the lawyers' sons and daughters to actually give a crap that one time a year. It'll be a tough. This will be like the one time it's a tough place to play because they'll actually all show up this game. I don't see Beck playing 30 points above his average apex in this spot on the road. I don't see Jackson Dart with a 276 apex. That's not crazy. This is number one in the country right now. He has the best apex in all of FBS right now, and this is a home game for him. The one elite squad in this matchup is the Ole Miss offense. This is actually a defensive draw, and people don't think about that when they think of Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss has had an easier schedule, but to that point, who would think that the best run defense in all of college football belongs to Ole Miss? They're setting the standard in GGAB at 0. They have by far more explosive passing game. They have a better running game. The only place where Georgia has any kind of advantage is in pass defense. But you know what? When you account for the difference in quarterback play, still, I'll take the Ole Miss passing offense against the Georgia passing offense in this one. I don't know about a 10-point margin. I think directionally it's correct. I do Ole Miss here, definitely plus the points, and for sure the money line too. Duck, what do you think?
Yeah, it just seems again this is a line that is just screaming to take Ole Miss. They're begging for Georgia money. Georgia off the big win in the world's greatest outdoor cocktail party or whatever they call that game anymore, plus the win against Texas. They're starting to find their own, but Florida threw some punches in that game early and had Georgia on the ropes before the late third quarter on. And what I've seen from Ole Miss and how their response has been since the loss against LSU, I think again, like you had alluded to, Ole Miss severely underrated defensive unit. Like you don't think Ole Miss and think rock solid defense, but at all three levels, their defense has really performed well this year. They've got a lot of guys that just they fly to the football. They don't miss tackles. They're really sound on third down, and that's what I like to back. I could certainly make the case this is a game that I typically do not bet on. It's just not my forte to bet these big SEC games, and I haven't, and I still may not, but I would be inclined to take Ole Miss. We talked about this a while back with another game that played out a similar nature. This could be a great live trading game, right? It could be back and forth. You might be able to take Ole Miss on the money line now, and then maybe they go down 7-0. You get them on the money line, or maybe they score first and Georgia's plus money on the money line, and you can live trade this back and forth and get plus money on either side and come out ahead no matter who wins.
Yeah, one point too about that loss to LSU. No shame in that one. Going to overtime at Death Valley is the worst result in the world. It's a lot better than their other loss, and it just seems since then they've been on a mission. They realize if we want to make the playoff, we have to have style points, and we cannot screw around anymore. And they've righted that ship, at least in my mind. Do you feel the same, Isaiah?
I'm already on Ole Miss money line for this one. I love Ole Miss here. The thing about Georgia is it sounds easy, right? With Georgia, it's if Carson Beck plays a good game and doesn't make mistakes, then Georgia's a good team and Georgia can win games. Carson Beck is not playing good games. He is not, and he's making a lot of mistakes. He looks terrible, and he's looked really bad in multiple games now where I would have expected him to look a lot better. The thing about the Florida game, too, everybody's, oh, Georgia pulled away. Georgia was the better team, all ignoring the fact that Florida lost DJ Lagway.
Yeah.
All of it. So Georgia started pulling away after they lost DJ Lagway.
Even then, let me ask you, because I had to walk the dog, and this is a really dumb personal question, but I'm dying to know because I didn't look back. So Georgia was up by 7, and I had Florida plus 16.5. Florida scores a touchdown to tie it up. Right then, they go in for the touchdown. I'm like, okay, I have time to walk the dog. And I come back, and it was taken off the board. Do you remember that touchdown? Did you see what happened?
I don't remember exact. I wasn't
Okay.
like watching the game close enough to remember
Okay.
exactly what that
Fair
was.
enough.
But
Nor was I. I was out walking the dog once they took it off.
so I don't think that game was as impressive for Georgia as some people wanted to believe. And the other thing is too is Florida is playing better. I still don't think Florida's a good team. I still don't think Billy Napier is a good coach. So I don't want to bet on Carson Beck coming into Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, their fans know what this game means, so they're going to be ready. It's going to be a good environment. I don't see Carson Beck playing a good game here. Or maybe he plays an okay game, but I don't think an okay game is enough because I still think that people, too, not only are they stuck on this idea of Ole Miss being an atrocious defense, which they're not, they're stuck on this idea of Georgia being an impenetrable wall on defense, which they're not. You can score. Mississippi State put over 30 points on this Georgia team. That's sad. Yeah. And that Mississippi State team is just atrocious. That's like the Vanderbilt of this year. Sorry, Vandy. I like Vandy this year. I love Ole Miss here. I think I wouldn't bet now. If you had to make me bet what the models say and bet on 10-point line here, I'm obviously not going to bet that Ole Miss wins by 10. I think it is more likely that Ole Miss wins this game comfortably than Georgia running away with. Yeah, I love the value on Ole Miss straight up here. I have them on the money line. I think this is a great spot for them. And it's a brutal spot for Georgia, too, because then they're going to, if they drop this game, then they got to go home and play a slog with Tennessee. So that stinks if you're Georgia right now.
Yeah, it's a shame that this is. I'd prefer that this is on prime time rather than our next game we're going to do. This I love this matchup.
I will say I'm waiting for it because I think it's going to come, and I'll make a second bet on this game if it does come. But I am very confident that FanDuel is going to put a boost on this game to pick a side and have it boosted because again with the Georgia -3, and then they throw a boost on it. Every casual is going to take Georgia here.
That's a good call.
One thing I could see this game just based on some trend from how the last couple of games have gone for Georgia specifically. If I can get 27.5, I'd take a first half under here.
That's not a bad call. Yeah. As long as we avoid a Carson Beck pick 6, which there's been 11 opportunities for that so far this season. Yeah, that was
It might
Speaking of
even out though.
score,
We might get one of those in the red zone too.
yeah, true, true. All right, next game, Alabama at LSU. Is this two is such a weird number? I'm not gonna. I'll relieve you from line monitoring duty here, Duck. I'll check this one out myself here. This is actually 2.5 now. All right, makes a little more sense here. Robert and I both have this a 7 point game in favor of Alabama. The only sorry, no, I've got an 8 point. Yeah. No, wait a minute. Okay, no, he's got it a 15 point game. I've got it 8. Interesting that it's moved a half point in that direction. If the difference here is basically LSU, I've got them with a touchdown more than Robert's model does. Alabama's kind of numbers, my numbers for Alabama defy the eye. Now maybe it's just because we get a lot of like highlights against Alabama from time to time that don't really encapsulate the full season performance. LSU, okay, their defense is a little better than last season, but they basically look like a more competent version of USC. Again, these numbers almost mirror exactly USC's here. But Alabama lead on both sides of the ball. I know it doesn't feel like that from time to time, but they do have a rough schedule, and I think that we see some of their worst moments as well as their best. Where Robert and I disagree the most is I think I have this a closer. Let me take that back. He's got, yeah, this is interesting. So he's got Nussmeier with a 116 apex, which doesn't really line up with what I'm seeing here. I've got an apex of 102 for him for the season, but that should struggle against what I'm one of the few people that has it elite, because I just run my numbers and do not pass judgment. So Nussmeier figures to have one of his tougher games in this one. I think I'm going against my model. I don't know if I'm going against my model in that I think that if I was going to make a play here, it would still be Alabama. I don't know if I'm all the way with Robert on a 15-point game here, but I think it's probably closer to 10. Milroe should have his way against what's a really obligatory or obliging rather LSU pass defense here. Total 57.5 feels about right. If anything, I think that doesn't really line up with the total. I'm not sure if LSU is going to get their share of that bargain. If we do the math here, that comes to let's call this 3 and call this 58. That comes to, or let's call it 57. So that comes to 54, 30 to 27 in favor of Alabama. Not sure if LSU gets to the 27. Not sure that they hold LSU to the 30. Not a huge play here, but this is a good game. This LSU's last gasp at clinging to a playoff berth, even though it's unlikely here. I like Alabama here. Don't know if I'm not going to play it, but I do. If I was going to play a side here, it's Alabama. Good game to watch. It's a primetime game. What's your take on this one, Isaiah?
Yeah, I like Alabama here. I also don't know if I'm going to play this one. It's tempting at -2, assuming that it has. What did you say? The line is it still -2? Yeah. So if I'm getting the hook, Alabama here for a couple reasons. One, I think people are still off on Alabama because they're looking at the last two Alabama losses. Now, I will say it is worth noting that the last two Alabama losses are on the road. Lost at Vanderbilt, lost at Tennessee. So that's worth noting. We're going into a road environment here. Alabama got the really good Georgia win. Outside of that, not the most impressive resume, but that's a really good win. When I'm looking at the stats on these two teams, I feel the same way on LSU, right? It's that LSU's got that really nice win over Ole Miss in overtime at home, and then nothing else. You've got they lost to USC, which I think you'll agree is not looking great.
Has not aged well.
Yeah. And then what? Nichols, South Carolina, UCLA, South Alabama. And Arkansas? What are we doing here? So I think you've got two teams where it's like they've got one really good win and then nothing else. I like Jalen Milroe in this spot. I feel like he's getting a little bit of baggage laid on him from past seasons. If he's going in to LSU and putting up a 174 apex, Alabama's fine here. I look at that G-Gab for LSU combined with that defensive apex for Alabama. So you're telling me that LSU can't run the ball. They're going to have to pass the ball against a good defense here, or a defense that can frustrate them. And then you've got Alabama who can pass the ball against this just Swiss cheese pass defense.
Yep.
I don't know if I would put it as crazy as Alabama's going to walk in there and win by 20, but if I only need them to win by 2 here, and I like Alabama's quarterback play better, and that better quarterback play is pairing with a really bad pass defense, I'm going to take Alabama here. I also don't like Brian Kelly. So
Wow. You buried the lead there. All right. Duck, do you like Brian Kelly? I do. I've been long been on record. I'm like the only person that admits it.
I don't. I think the antics are a little bit too much and they get tiring at times. So, not a huge fan of his, to be honest with you.
All right, and the rest of the game. Sorry, that was my handoff to you.
Yeah, I think that these teams are really. It's going to be a great matchup. It doesn't seem like that long ago when these 6-0 games are 9-6 or 13-7. That is not going to be this. But a couple of concerning things for LSU, just that the metrics will show. LSU defensively is just 109th in the country in explosiveness allowed. So they're prone to allowing the big play.
Yep.
And they really struggle in rush play explosiveness on offense and also pass down explosiveness, which Alabama does not give up here. You can make the case that it's going to be a struggle for LSU offensively, especially if they have to try to line up against that elite defensive line and protect the quarterback. It may not be very comfortable for Nussmeier back there, especially if that first or second read is not open. And that really could be a situation where this game is won or lost because, like you mentioned, Buck, I think Alabama's secondary is still above average, right? They take a little bit of flack for some of their performances, but I think their secondary is actually pretty good. And I think that receiving group is going to struggle to find separation. You're going to have to hesitate. You're going to hold the ball a little bit long, and that's going to create sacks. It's going to create pressure. It's going to create situations for turnover-worthy plays. And those are all bad things for LSU. And goodness sakes, Alabama is they've got some advantages there. They've got some advantages for being able to stop the run. And yeah, again, not one I've gotten involved with yet, but my inclination is to take Alabama.
This is why I like doing podcasts like this because I think I've talked myself into a small play on Bama here, even though my model didn't have it. Robert had an opinion on this. It was I kind of like Alabama here, so not too much detail from Robert, but we're all aligned on that one here.
Yeah, not far from a dual model either, according to the numbers.
It's really close. Yeah, it's really close because when it opened at 2, it was 6, and it needs to be 7. So if it just moved the other way, but not to be. But you know what? I'll make a 0.2 unit play on that. All right, last one here. Washington at Penn State. I find fascinating for a couple of reasons. I don't think Washington, just from a big picture standpoint, Washington's a very different team on the road than home. They had 2 road games and a neutral. Rutgers, Washington State, and what was the other one that they just had? Indiana. They had a win expectancy of over 65% in all those games, and they lost all 3. Interesting that none of those were at home. They're just a different team away from home. My model is just inexplicably high on Washington. It finds them very balanced, overlooked on defense. I will say the one real big departure between the model and reality for Washington is their special teams are just reliably horrible. It takes a lot to get on the grid of like just consistently bad. And my God, just every week they do something that just is just amazing. My model actually almost had this. First of all, let's update the line. Maybe this has moved enough because this is on my watch list here. Is this moved up to 14? A lot of these just shy of 2 touchdown or just like a field goal lines here this week, huh?
Yeah, I've got 13.5. Total is 45.5.
Yeah. If it moves to 14, it's a dual model play, as basically we've got plenty of margin on Robert's model, and we just need one more point on my model here. Like I said, these are 2. We all know Penn State's got a good defense, but Washington's defense is really underappreciated. I guess the one thing where I think Robert's model is more optimistic than mine is he's got Will Rogers at the 144 apex. Not sure I see that be above his average against a really good pass defense here. And like I said, this is on the road, so maybe not the most reasonable scenario to project out. But I just think Washington is so overlooked here, just big picture. I'm still smarting because they should have covered that stupid Rutgers game, but 3 missed field goals and the worst penalty I think I've ever seen.
Still can't get over that one.
That was something special. So I'm pretty much inclined. I'm gonna wait, and if it gets to 14, it'll be a full unit play, and if not, I might just make it like a 0.2 units play just for fun on the Huskies. How do you see this one, Duck?
You're putting a lot of faith in a team that is just been going through the brutal rigors of the Big Ten, and they have not won a road game this season. And they're 0-3 ATS with blowout
Yep.
losses against Iowa and Indiana. Now, the spot would certainly think that this would be favorable for Washington. This is a tough spot for Penn State off of the brutal loss against Ohio State down there on the goal line. How do you not punch that one in? That was unreal. They had a chance to win against Ohio State and have to feel like they let it slip through. Now, the Penn State group will either rise above it and we'll see another level from them getting ready for gearing up for playoff time, or they'll just muddle through this one and they'll win by a field goal late. It'll be interesting to see how that one looks. But it's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to be inclined to back Washington on the road against that Penn State front seven and feel like Washington's going to have a lot of success with moving the football. They're not going to be able to run it very much and very well, I wouldn't think. What do you got there for a projection? 4 yards a carry? So, maybe. But this seems like a low scoring game. The other factor, and this is a real factor, whether you believe it or not. So James Franklin knows the number, and he'll punch one in late to cover. If they're up by 11 and he can take knees, they don't take knees. And so it's hard to fade Penn State at home when he knows the number and he wants to cover the number. So it's my thought on where we're at with that one. So I don't have a real strong position on it, but hard to bet Washington here, in my opinion.
All right. So you and I disagree. Isaiah, what do you think here?
If the line's at the 13.5, I would lean towards Penn State on here. Now, there's a couple ways to think. Big Ten game, right? So this is supposed to be my territory, even though we're talking about Washington. If you're going to come into Penn State, into Happy Valley as an unranked team, the way you keep it close with Penn State is playing in a low scoring type game. You want to muck it up, and you can't make mistakes. What does this Washington team do? They make mistakes. They find stupid ways to blow their chances. I can't back that on the road at Penn State. Now, there's plenty of narrative to go around with Penn State right now. Because, of course, immediately after they lose to Ohio State, first thing that gets blasted on my feed is the Josh Pate cheerleader. James Franklin's not overrated. He's properly rated. And I'm so sick of hearing that. Because if you're Penn State and you're ranked in the top 10 every single year, you can't be 1-18 against top competition. You can't. Not in 9 years. You need to win a second game. Good news for Penn State. Washington's not ranked. Washington is not bowl eligible yet. It's not an elite team. James Franklin beats non-elite teams. And like Duck mentioned, James Franklin knows the number. James Franklin is also mad because they lost another big game. And he's blaming everybody. He's blaming the officials. He's blaming everything for it. He's going after fans in the stand after the game. James Franklin is not in a good mood right now. So if I had to take a side on this, I have not bet this game. I don't think I'm going to bet this game. But if I had to take a side on it, I would take Penn State. It's also a night game. Beaver Stadium that night, obviously much different animal. We'll see if my gut changes on that, whether I do want to put a little bit on it. But I think this is a bad spot for Washington when James Franklin wants to make everybody forget that he lost a big game.
Yeah, unfortunately, this one's hidden on Peacock, too.
Yeah, they put this one on Peacock so that they could put the big noon kickoff game is just a fantastic contest at Ohio State featuring my Purdue Boilermakers.
There you go. Yeah. All right. On that
How
topic,
that didn't get Peacock.
yeah. On that topic, okay, so you two disagree with me. Fair enough. Are you surprised that Ryan Walters is still employed by Purdue? I literally yesterday was Googling. I thought he'd be fired after that. It just
I am not surprised he's still employed. I will be surprised if he is still employed at the end of the season. This is not a school that fires people in the middle of the year. When they fired Hazel in the middle of the year, that was after 3 years, 3.5 years, and a particularly insulting stretch that ended in Iowa putting up 40 points at home in the first half. And then the offense came back out to do like a Hail Mary, and the quarterback took a timeout, and then they came back out on the field and took a knee going into that. This is not a school that fires people in the middle of the season. I do expect that they will fire him at the end of the year, though. I feel bad. I feel a little bad for the guy. I think he still does have some stuff. He's just not ready. You can't. I think what it's shown is that you can't go from. Most people cannot go from coordinator to Big Ten head coach, especially at a program where you're not going to get blue chip talent. I don't no ill will against the guy. Hope he can maybe he can find himself a Mac job or something and work his way back up. But I would be stunned if he's still here next year.
As will I. All right, Duck, Isaiah, thank you both. This was really fun. We will be back with the regular Sharpest College Football podcast reviewing this week on probably drop Tuesday of next week. Excuse me. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. I'm amazed at how many views this thing gets. This was just an afterthought in the middle of the season. It's done very well. We appreciate it. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're probably one of the smartest people around because you got to be a real nerd and like the smart discussion. So congratulations on that. Good luck everyone this week. Isaiah, Doug, thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.